It's been almost 2 weeks since we got back from gifting Seattle, and it took till today to do a show about it. It just rained in Southern California. We just had a little thunder and quite a lot of rain, and after rain, the energy is really good. So this is a great time to talk about Towerbusting Seattle.
That's right. Thank you for joining us here on the Human Frequency. This is another tropical monsoon, and this is, as we're finding out, what is natural for this area at this time of year. But in past times, there's just been too much DOR for these rains to come. You know, back in 2012 and 2013, we were in LA, living in LA, and we were seeing the monsoon clouds appear over the mountains, and we would see them just being flattened out by what at the time we thought was geoengineering, but as we later learned was the DORizing of these big pockets of moisture that would come in.
And that's another way to look at the term called geoengineering, because we're talking about terraforming, and it is a form of geoengineering, but it's not what you think it is. There's so much more to it than just the spraying of chemtrails. Terraforming is a huge operation. It's been going on Earth for eons, and it's not just limited to chemtrails in the sky. And we will be talking about some of the strange things we saw on this trip regarding the geology of the Earth. So it's not just the sky that's been terraformed, it's the Earth. We learned a lot up in the Pacific Northwest doing this, and we actually completed the coastal grid now all the way from San Diego, California to Aberdeen, Washington. That's a very, very long way.
And that's almost border to border.
That's the goal. I mean, I'd like to go past the borders, but we've talked about the annoying things about leaving countries. So we haven't done it yet. But the coastal grid is now complete because it's complete for that distance. We do have more to do. We went to San Diego in June, and we did a very thorough gridding of that city. We went all the way down as far as we could within the United States of America, and then we went a month later up to the Seattle area and other places around Oregon and Washington that we hadn't gotten to. So it was very important to us to neutralize everything along the coast so that jet streams can come through the continent. I think this will change weather across the entire continent ultimately.
Now, what's important when you're neutralizing DOR sources in this quantity is that you have to take different routes, and we take different routes each time we go up. Now, inevitably, there's going to be some areas where we've already done, and we just have to get through there to get to the new areas. But we try and change it up as much as possible so that we're constantly gifting new areas and neutralizing the DOR sources there.
On this trip, we distributed almost 500 tower busters, and we went to a lot of new places. We were in northeastern California, southeastern Oregon. We went through places we'd been to before, like Portland, and we made our way up to Seattle, and then went out to the coast and did the rest of the work we were going to do. And it was a huge, huge effort, a very, very DORized and hostile region. It seems to people that it's just very pretty up there. There's mountains and trees, but there's so much DOR. It's such heavy energy. So there might be pretty scenery, but the energy's heavy. And then when you also learn about the hidden secrets of the geology of our Earth, then you know that a lot of that beautiful scenery is actually the scenes of destruction. And you might think it's pretty, but what it looked like before it became terraformed to what we see today, it was beautiful beyond anything we could imagine.
Yes, you have to look past the 3D surface appearance of things when you see nice trees and a nice lake or pond or river or whatever. Most people just they can't look past that. But if you can, and you'll start to notice things like the low ceiling that you talk about so often,
That's the
Sharon.
Frequency fence.
Yes, the flat gray skies and just the general feeling of oppression that you can't really tangibly explain in words. It's just something that you feel and something that you sense when you're there. And by flipping that energy, by neutralizing those cell phone towers, you really undo a lot of that stuff, and you start to see just how artificial that oppressive environment really is.
Right. That energy is completely artificial. So we just get accustomed to a certain feeling, and then we don't really know what it actually is like on Earth. And that's why we're susceptible to propaganda, because we really don't know anything about the history of our weather, climate, or geology. We don't know anything.
Yeah, that would explain the excessive heat watch that we have, and it's, 74, 75
And it
today?
just rained, and it's beautiful. We've been getting rain in Southern California in the summer, and we had a feeling this would happen. We theorized that when we gifted first San Diego, that was an important strategic point because it connects with the grids of the eastern deserts in Southern California, which we've gridded a long time ago. So we have a completion of a gridded area. But it was also the Bay Area, and particularly the Puget Sound area. We just kept working up north to break down blockages to the weather that comes in because the jet stream is west to east.
That's
naturally.
what it's about.
So
and one just helps the other.
we thought that neutralizing the arrays in Washington and completing that part of the coastal grid would actually increase monsoon season in the Southwest. And what ends up happening, and this has been in the news this last week, is the monsoons are starting earlier. They're heavier. We're having record-breaking rains in Las Vegas. Just in one day, they got an entire July's worth of rain for what's averaged. And that was one rainstorm. And Palm Springs also, they had a huge record-breaking rain where they got an inch of rain, and normally, I think the previous record for that was way, way less than, it was like a 0.3 of an inch. I can't remember the exact amount, but it was tiny, and that was in 98. And then recently, there was this one that was the biggest rain they had on that day in Palm Springs. The news story is actually on my website, so you can read the exact story if you want to see that. And it's interesting to see these increased monsoons. Moving westward, we're now getting monsoonal moisture in parts of Southern California that are typically dry in the summer.
What's also interesting is when this sort of thing happens is to watch the propagandists falling over themselves to create these ridiculous explanations for why this is happening, and they'll stop at nothing to explain it away and give you a version that is completely the opposite of what is actually happening.
Well, gifting Seattle actually brought sun to Seattle, and they really needed it. I heard a couple of different people just in passing in Washington, one in Seattle and one in Aberdeen, comment on the sun, enjoying the sunshine, seeing the sun for the first time in days. And it's summertime, and it should be sunny there. There should be a mix of rain and sun for everyone. This Earth was a garden planet. It was pretty even in climate before it was manipulated. So there's no reason why there's so many areas that are uninhabitable on Earth, because the whole Earth was once habitable, and there really isn't land scarcity. We just have to make everywhere habitable once again, and that's with using orgone energy.
That's right. And gifting orgonite is the best way to do that. And we gifted a lot of pieces on this trip, almost 500, just shy of that. So our stock of TBs is very low right now. So we apologize for that, and we thank you for your patience as we get back to where we need to be, a more manageable level of pieces on our store.
And if you want to do some serious gifting, you can use our tutorial video and make your own tower busters that look just like ours. You can change up the materials and make them your own. So there's a video there that shows you exactly how to make them. And you need the metals, you need the resin, and quartz crystals and copper wire. Those are the ingredients for the most basic tower buster. So it's pretty easy to make. You just have to get used to working with that kind of material. And
I should add, your quartz does not have to be fancy at all. It can be dust, it can be chips, fragments. It does not have to be nice at all. So just get the cheapest stuff you can. As long as it's quartz, it'll do. Because remember, quartz has very specific piezoelectric properties, and those properties are activated by the compression of the resin. That's another thing. You need a catalyzing resin.
And that's great for distributing when you're gifting because it's a plastic and it just lasts. It can get rained on, and it will. So it can be out there in the environment and not disintegrate. So on this gifting trip, we went to many new places. We went through northeastern California and into southeastern Oregon, and we had never gifted there before, and we saw some pretty interesting landscapes. There were stumps of the giant trees everywhere. I mean, obvious ones. Not just
big stumps, and egregious ones too, with the deep gouges in them.
You could see that they were flat cut they're not, I don't know how a mesa would grow like this naturally. When you look at it as a giant tree and you see the bark, which you can see in southeastern Oregon, you can actually see the tree bark on them. And in Medford and Ashland too, which were other places we went through, you could see it's a tree stump. I don't even know how else to say it. Just look at it and you'll see it now that you know. And if you watch There Are No Forests on Earth, which I think now, I couldn't find the Deep Inside the Rabbit Hole version when I looked for it. I think it might have been pulled. So you can watch the original one where the Russian guy who made it is talking. I think you could still see that on YouTube. But this is a very huge movie. It's very important. So, of course, I know why they pulled it from YouTube.
Of course. But back to southeastern Oregon, desolate. Very desolate out there. I think I remarked to you at one point that the scenery around me, it could be Kazakhstan. And not that I've been to Kazakhstan, but I've seen photos, and I wouldn't be able to necessarily tell the difference.
Yeah, and then when we were in Seattle, we actually met someone from Kazakhstan, so that was kind of interesting. But yes.
Why do things like that always seem to happen?
No,
if I'd said Mongolia or Kyrgyzstan, they would have been from there.
Yeah, because it's just the strange reality we live in. It's like a show. It's a theater. It's the hologram. So
it's a reality TV show.
It is. The
South
whole thing.
Park was right.
Yeah, they said that Earth was just a reality show, and that we were all just stuck here on this planet to entertain these aliens. So who knows? But anyway, southeastern Oregon was definitely desolate. But while we were there, we did a lot of DOR lifting by tossing orgonite, sometimes just into the land, because there were huge areas without cell towers. But it didn't mean the land didn't need work. So we just kept tossing, and we saw things we'd never seen before, like these giant stumps of a scale that I hadn't seen yet. Oregon has got a ton of these. And we also saw something really crazy in the sky. We saw the spiral at the end of the day because of all the orgonite gifting. There's often a spiraling cloud at the sunset. But this time, the spiraling cloud at the sunset was full of sprayer planes. And they all looked like they were diving into the spiral. I am not kidding. I got the best picture I could of this. It was difficult to photograph. But you could see this on the blog. There is definitely a movement of the chemtrail planes towards it from every direction. So I was saying to Gabriel, this doesn't look like the flight paths of planes going into PDX. Is this what they do? They're all going towards each other. They're going around in circles. It was just all glitched out. So we saw these planes literally spiraling into the sunset and creating a chemtrail spiral. So then we started to ask ourselves what we were seeing, because we already know they're not regular planes. Everybody knows that it's different, that this isn't normal.
And if you don't know
air traffic,
now you do.
But the chemtrails themselves, the planes that were spraying them, were literally circling. They'd hit this vortex and they would circle into it. And whenever they came towards it, I couldn't tell if they were diving towards it or being sucked into it.
It reminded me of like a piece of debris when in a bathtub, when the water is circling the drain there at the very end and it's just being sucked down. That's what it seemed like to me.
It did look like a bunch of parasites going down the drain. And I really do.
And let's hope that's the truth.
I really do hope that's what we were seeing. So it was a new sight, never seen before, of a chemtrail spiral. The planes were either diving into it or being sucked into it. And you could see them, if they weren't in it, they would chem dash, the dashes would form, the in and out, like weaving like fabric. They weave like thread through fabric in and out of our dimension. We think we're seeing planes stopping and starting, spraying something. But because the planes sometimes disappear or change shape, I have reason to believe that these are not regular planes and that this is interdimensional warfare. And they're weaving in and out of our dimension. What forces them out of our dimension is orgone energy. Wilhelm Reich used his cloudbuster against them. And it was his space gun. So the orgone repels them. That we see. It's not just toxins it repels. It's repelling some kind of guys up there.
This is all documented, by the way, in his last book, Contact with Space. We're not just using terms like space gun and and stuff like that. I know to the layperson that would sound absolutely nutty, but he documented it.
And we did too.
Mm-hmm.
So all I say is this. Watch the sprayers, watch them carefully. Get a camera that zooms in really far and take pictures of them and start to look at the anomalies in these planes, because something weird's going on up there, and they do change shape and they do disappear. And contrails don't stop and start, so it's a chemtrail. But we also know it's not just the spraying of metals. This is so much more than biological warfare. It's energetic. It's interdimensional. We need to get rid of these guys. These guys are sucking the lifeblood of this planet. Look what they've done to this place. Have you seen the film Avatar? They describe it as if the humans did this to another planet. That the humans went into another planet and cut down the giant tree where all the beings, the humanoids there lived.
The home tree.
Yeah. This is what happened here. But
it wasn't the humans that did it.
And the parasites always want to portray humans as parasites. That's why they say we're causing global warming. We're overpopulating the earth. We're destroying everything. It's them, but they portray us that way, like in the film Avatar. But what happened in Avatar is what happened here. They came here, they terraformed it, but we didn't win. We didn't fight them back. They destroyed everything. Everything. They didn't leave a trace. They took everything they could of the ancient trees of this planet.
Mm-hmm. Nothing but stumps. There's not a single one left. Nothing but stumps.
There's not a single one. There are giant redwoods, which are our modern version of what there used to be here.
But those are carbon, not silicon-based.
What we have on Earth is a scene of great destruction. Who did it? It doesn't even matter who did it. All that matters is that we make them stop and get rid of them. And we know that Oregon Energy does that. And it's very hard to prove because a lot of it is just stuff you can only observe with your eyes or feel with your own body or mind.
Gift first, ask questions later.
So anyway.
And by the way, PDX is the abbreviation for Portland Airport. I know, Sharon, you get frustrated at people who use that acronym to describe the city itself.
Yes, because it's completely ridiculous.
Just wanted to point that out.
Mm-hmm. So we did tower bust and just toss in Southeast Oregon and saw some amazing sights. We went to Bend for the first time, and that place is pretty small, and we dropped some TBs there. We needed to do that. And we went through Bend and into Portland. We went through Eastern Oregon into Portland, and that area is very DORized. It's very sad. The feeling of destruction, see, this is on an etheric level, so many people don't see it this way. They just see the pretty landscape. But on a higher plane, that land holds more sorrow than a lot of other lands. A lot of lands have already crossed the threshold towards recovery. And somehow the deserts of the Southwest energetically are much purer than a lot of these more lush-looking green lands of the Northwest. So there's a sorrow throughout the land. And according to the No Forests movie, this makes a lot of sense to me. Those volcanoes up there are actually waste piles of volatile materials.
Oh, yeah. And
based on the terraforming operations.
It's Mount Hood, Mount Rainier, Mount Adams.
Being beneath the shadow of a mountain like that is bad energy. I don't care what anybody tells you about the really awesome volcano that they can see from their ranch, but those things are the symbols of the destruction of our earth. They're parasitic, and that is DOR.
Yeah, it was just a crazy sight going through that part of Oregon, and I hadn't been through there in about 25 years. I went to Crater Lake when I was a kid, but Bend was in that place kind of right in the center of Oregon, where the desert parts of the east meets the more tree prominent parts of the west, and that kind of meets right about the spot where Bend is.
And Bend was pretty nice as far as the landscape goes. That's probably the nicest part of Oregon that I've been to other than the coast. It's like the mountains where we live. It's a mixture of scrubby pine trees and sagebrush. So I think it's quite beautiful visually, but I also find something energizing about that type of sage plant being in the landscape. So there's some kind of living desert. It's like a living desert. To me, that the triumph of the living desert is the best energy that one will ever feel. So that was a pretty interesting part of Oregon. And going into Portland, we were very pleased because Portland had better energy. We gifted Portland in November of 2016, and it was a very bad scene there energetically. And I lived there for a long time, so I know it's torture, but it doesn't have to be that way. And this time we went back, and that feeling of oppression was much lighter. It felt like a better place. So removing the DOR helped Portland quite a bit. It was nice. So we get to revisit a place, and then I got to revisit many places I knew from my time living in the Northwest, but had never gifted because I didn't know about orgonite. So we went up through Washington, central Washington, very heavy DOR. We did some DOR lifting as we tossed. And when we arrived in Seattle, that was the filthiest looking air I've ever seen in my life. It was like smoke wisps. I was looking for the fire. Mm-hmm. The air was so dirty and heavy and DOR-ish.
It's going to surprise most people, but it was absolutely awful. I've never seen anything like it. And we've done a lot of gifting in the past almost 5 years. It was crazy the things we saw. Now, we knew going into this that based on the amount of cell towers we saw in Portland, that we would see a lot in Washington too. And that ties into what we know about the weather war that we've been studying for years now, and why they're putting all those cell towers up there, and how that's used to mitigate the rains early in their lifetime, for lack of a better word, and coming into California. So that's just their way of reducing those rains. Mm-hmm. So we knew going into this trip that there would be a lot of towers there, and we were not disappointed.
No, there was more towers than I ever saw anywhere. It was very comparable with Las Vegas in the amount of towers, and Portland. These are very heavy DOR cities. Every city is, but some are more strategic than others. And this area of the Northwest is very strategic in the weather war, like you just said. So Seattle, the energy there is heavy. And I think everybody knows this. They think it's just, it's the rain. People don't like the gloomy weather. That's not what the problem is. It's not the rain. The problem is the bad energy. And this is no insult to people from Seattle or who live there. When we talk about cities, we talk about horrible energy and how oppressive things are, not because we don't think that's a nice city. It has nothing to do with the physical amenities of the place, because you might have a beautiful city with nice houses and trees like Seattle. It's a beautiful city and they let things grow. It's much nicer than LA in that way. But energetically, it's very hard to be there. So if you're the kind of person that can feel those cell phone towers, and you could feel other people's cell phones and it hurts you, like I am, then a place like Seattle is difficult. So it's of no insult to you or your city, but we have to heal these energetic problems. Yeah. Whether you could feel them or not, once they're removed, you'll feel better, I guarantee you. So we stayed at a communist Airbnb in Seattle. I guess that's what I should have expected out of...
Well, there was no portrait of Lenin hanging up there, but it's safe to say that it was at least a socialist Airbnb.
Very much so, and just like everything in the Pacific Northwest, it looked quaint and it looked charming online, and then once we got there, it was something completely different. So it was very cute, nice yard. Very nice yard.
Again, it's the 3D thing.
The house itself was cute and old. It was overcrowded, and it was really noisy. There were 6 people sharing one bathroom, and it was constant activity and people talking about the places they visited around the world and the diseases they've gotten. Lots of visitors, lots of people sleeping over. It was a hippie house. It was a nightmare. So I didn't review them because they were actually nice and pleasant with us, and I didn't want to give them a bad review on Airbnb. But it was a nightmare, and I just don't understand this mentality. It was a very socialist vibe. The conversations were impossible to participate in. Stuff about contracts between China and the United States and Trump and stuff that I can't get involved in because it's none of my business.
Yeah, who cares about the CEO of that company? My person doesn't do business with that company. Why should I care? Your person doesn't do business with that company either.
Well, if I could sum up the ethic that pervades Seattle, and I'm not saying that everyone who lives there feels this way. I'm sure there's plenty of people who are annoyed about this stuff like I was when I lived in Portland. But to sum it up, I saw a bumper sticker on a car that said, "Love your neighbor, no exceptions." Now I have to ask, would you love me? Do you love libertarians? Do you love Christians?
Well, you're not a Christian or a libertarian.
No, I'm not. But I'm just giving examples.
I know you are.
I'm just saying, I think that means love your gay neighbor. I'm just saying. There's nothing wrong with that. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But
I knew a Seinfeld reference was forthcoming.
But if someone loves their gay neighbor, do they love their Christian neighbor? Or do they disagree with them? Do they love their Republican neighbor? What if they've got a neighbor next door who loves Trump? Do they love him because they hate Trump? So where does the love stop and start?
The love stops wherever you want it to stop, because up there it's like it's a selective thing. They get to choose who they love and who they don't, but they tell other people that, no, you must love all of them, no exceptions. But I, the originator of this statement, can do whatever the hell I want.
Conformity is huge in the Pacific Northwest. Another thing that's huge up there is the poverty vibe. And it doesn't matter, people can have a lot of money. In fact, you have to have a lot of money to live in that area now. It's very expensive. But everybody always pleads poverty and dresses like they're poor. And if you got some nice clothes at Goodwill and put together a great outfit, they will look down their noses at you because they'll think you're rich. It's all about the appearance. So we've got this sort of communist Agenda 21 pervading ethic in the city of Seattle. And it does color everything. It seeps into every interaction. So you do have to take into account what that does to the energy of an area. But I also think that people might free their minds a lot more without all that DOR interference. Because I can tell you this, the people who are communists and socialists like this that I disagree with, they are generally good people and well-meaning people. They generally want good things in the earth, but they just don't get what's going on. So I don't want to look down at people about this because it is a DOR problem. But that's huge in Seattle. The Agenda 21 bike lobby, it's very big in the Northwest.
Well, it's fascism is what it is, or more specifically corporate fascism. And I'm really hoping, and I think I'm right to hope this, that the neutralizing all of those cell towers will help to mitigate some of that mind control that gets people in this mentality, because it's no good for anyone. When you really take a good hard long look at it, it doesn't benefit any living thing.
Well, since we're on the subject of what the energy of the cities is, this is actually as important of an issue as what's going on in the skies and weather. So when we're distributing Orgonite, we're trying to help people's minds. We're trying to get rid of a source of anguish for them, actually. The cell towers are a source of extreme anguish for people. And one huge problem in the city is that it is satanic. I mean, there's a lot of references to, especially in LA, where the entertainment industry is centered. There are a lot of references in cities to Lucifer and the devil. I mean, we saw a girl in LA with a Lucifer tattoo. I thought it said Jennifer. But I was sorely mistaken.
And it was in a very strange place too. It was right on her collarbone. Like it was just going down right where a necklace would be. And one, that's a strange place for any tattoo. But to have a Lucifer tattoo there. And this goes back to Agenda 21 and the homogenization of cities. And this is why they're all satanic in this way.
Well, Seattle was that way. That's why I mentioned that it's sort of an urban problem. It is in LA. It's very obvious there because of the entertainment industry, which is Luciferian. Everybody knows that. You know, I don't need to do a show about that because other people have done it. But in Seattle, there was a guy, and this was kind of sad. Some guy that worked at Safeway. He was a Safeway checker, and he had a little pentagram necklace, and he was hopped up on methamphetamines. This guy was just bouncing off the ceiling, and this was, at first I said, oh, venti latte, but of course it was much more than that. Once we got up to this guy's line, I was like, this guy is completely tweaked out of his mind. And I felt really bad for him because here he is stuck working at Safeway, and he's got the pentagram he's wearing. Okay, you're shown who your allegiance is to, and you're hopped up on horrible drugs. I understand. I wouldn't want to live in Seattle either. It is torture. Portland was torture. The Northwest is torture. I'm just telling you like it is. You might love Seattle, but it's torture. You don't know what these towers are doing to your mind. It's such a huge concentration there. And it's just too much. So people lose their minds. And actually, I did start to lose my mind in the South Sound area. I was literally losing
that was just the worst.
my marbles.
That was just the worst, because Seattle's a little ways up on the Sound, but as we went down to where the southernmost point of it is, oh man, it was just unbearable down there.
And yes, there is a Tacoma aroma. It smells bad in Tacoma. I don't know why, but there's a lot of nasty industry there. And I can also tell you, it was literally the most stressful place we have ever gifted. I have never felt that much bad energy from one place. And I used to love Tacoma when I lived up there. I loved the broken down buildings. Back then, everything was boarded up and all the windows were broken. Now they've put in stores. But I liked it when it was a mess. And I used to play at the Bob's Java Jive, which was a coffee pot shaped building where they put on rock shows. And I liked it up there. I thought it was cute. But
Speaking of venti latte.
Yeah. But actually they serve beer. Like just Pabst. I think only Pabst.
That's not beer.
I know.
It's swill.
Well, they love Pabst up there too, but that's really a story for another day. But anyway, I loved Tacoma back then, and I didn't see these levels of existence back then. I couldn't perceive beyond the 3D. I was very materialistic. I wanted to be a rock star, all this stupid stuff. I believed a lot of lies that came from Seattle, actually. We all believed those lies out of Seattle. Kurt Cobain, and her husband, Courtney Love. These people are sick. This is Illuminati hoax. This is an Illuminati hoax, just so you know.
More on that later.
But that whole place, I loved it, but I loved it for the wrong reasons. I liked the broken buildings. I liked the rain. I liked the gloom. I was in a DOR-ish headspace. I lived in Portland. I was depressed. I wanted material things that I could never have. I wanted to be famous, and now I want nothing more than to be completely unknown. So now I've changed, and I see things completely differently, and now Tacoma doesn't look like it used to look to me. In fact, all I feel now is the energy. And the energy is so harsh. But we did so much tower busting that by the end of that day, we did feel a lightening up of the energy pretty significantly. So Tacoma was very, very stressful. It's the kind of place where you start to fight and get agitated. And we actually didn't really fight too much in Tacoma. I don't remember too well. It was very stressful because you're navigating with a map. A lot of roads were closed. And so they were putting us onto detours that I didn't have on my map. Like I had a very limited map of Tacoma to work with. We do not use GPS when we gift. So navigating was difficult. We didn't want to miss towers. Missing a tower is one of the most frustrating things when you're gifting, especially if it's so nearby and you think, should I just turn around and go back for it? But you're on the freeway and you're in the, sometimes it's hard to do that because you have other places you need to get to.
Yeah, you're on a time clock and there's lots more gifting to be done. So it's very frustrating. And may I also mention that when we went through, when we were done, did not smell the aroma at all.
That's really amazing because it really did change. It was a pollutant in the air, clearly, that didn't smell good. And Orgone Energy throws that stuff away from the earth. So it was nice to do that and to have that kind of confirmation, although that is just something we could record. I can't prove that to you. What I can show you is the beautiful pictures of the skies in Tacoma as the DOR transmuted. And that evening we had a big rainstorm. And I know that rain is common in Seattle, but not in July. Not like what we had. It was a torrential downpour. It was a ripping open of the sky as that DOR was neutralized. And it ended with a nice rainbow and then ended with organite skies, crystal clear evening skies. And then now, after that, lots of sunny days for Seattle. So this weather warfare needs to be broken down. Breaking that down brought sun to Seattle and rain to the southwest. So everybody gets a balance and can have a little of everything they need. We all need rain and sun in moderation. So I was very, very happy to do that and have that confirmation. Now, energetically, this place still needs a lot of work. We spent about 3 days gifting Seattle.
Yeah, 3 days.
And one of the specific places that we targeted, this was Gabriel's idea, was the corner where Mia Zapata was killed. And this is Mia Zapata, the lead singer of the Gits, which was a 90s band from Seattle. Upon closer inspection, I think that Mia Zapata is part of the problem. I don't like people being killed off at 27. I think it's a terrible thing. But my viewpoint on it is that she was part of the whole Illuminati music machine on a lower level, because they have to pretend like we can play in clubs and get discovered. That's part of the game. That's part of the hoax, is to make us believe it's real and organic.
Right.
So there are people like Mia Zapata, actors on the lower level. She was a transgender, I'm pretty sure. And a lot of the Illuminati performers are, both in music and all forms of media, like TV. Your favorite TV actors and movie actors are mostly
especially
transgender. So anyway, I do think she might have been that. However, her sacrificial murder at the age of 27 in the Capitol Hill neighborhood of Seattle was just part of the same story. It's always that 27 club. That's the age. And strangely, they like 33 for actors, don't they? And 33 is a Masonic number.
And that's my age, so now I've got something to worry about for the next 6 months or so.
Well, it'll all be done soon, and you'll be 34, and then we can leave this all behind. But yeah, Mia Zapata's murder occurred in this part of Capitol Hill, and that felt energetically literally identical to other places that I had been gifting with you. And if you had blindfolded me and put me in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, that corner where she was killed, and then put me on Fremont Street in Las Vegas, where Louis Campos was killed, who we talked about in our Gifting Las Vegas episode, where we also gifted where he was killed. And then you also compare that to just the general vibe, the general energy of the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco, which was referred to as the Haight-Ashtray period of American history by a beloved TV character on Daria. And I fully concur.
And I second that.
If you put me in any of those places blindfolded, I wouldn't be able to tell you which one I was in. There was no energetic difference between that corner in Las Vegas and that corner in Capitol Hill. The energy signature of both was identical. And interestingly, also, both had no foliage for me to hide the Towerbuster in. It was a concrete jungle. So it was hard to find a hiding place for it, but I did it in memory of Mia Zapata, who we came home to see was a tranny. That's fine. They all are. I mean, Kurt Cobain, what a joke. Nirvana, what a hoax. Can you believe how we were all suckered in by this stuff? And then we started bands and thought we could be famous. And we were chasing an unattainable goal. There's so many industries feeding off of wannabe musicians. And nobody can ever make it in that world. And so anyway, we gifted a bad energy spot. And no disrespect to Mia Zapata, because I think that even clones suffer. We just started telling it like it is.
Yeah, so we went there almost exactly the 25th anniversary of when this murder happened. And yeah, I felt the energy at that corner too, and it was especially bad. I mean, it was bad everywhere in Seattle, but that intersection specifically, and I didn't see any cell panels, by the way, so I couldn't
They were around near, but not
They
right
were
there.
around, but right there, I couldn't detect any overt reason why it would be worse there. But it was.
Well, you know, we can't see the geology of this area, so we don't actually know what Seattle looked like before it was built as a city. We would need to look at historical photographs, and actually that might be what I need to do to see what kind of trauma happened there, because all of these places are the scenes of great destruction. So I can only infer that places like Seattle and Portland that have bad energy but seem like pretty places, you wonder, why is there bad energy? I can only infer that something really terrible happened there energetically in the past, which is why the Willamette Valley was called the Valley of Sickness and Death by the Native Americans. Who knows what happened? And the history is all written wrong, too. It's all convoluted, and everything's been altered in the history books, so we really don't know what's happened.
The trauma there is recent, too. A lot more recent than in other places we visited and gifted. So, yeah, that downpour, that was at the very end, and that was a very interesting experience to drive through that and finish our gifting. And that was it for Seattle, and then we went down the coast and completed our gridding. Aberdeen, and now all the way down to near the Mexican border. That's where we're at now.
It's pretty huge. We've actually looked at this on the maps, and we are amazed at how much gifting has been done at this point. And we also thank everybody who's participated, because I know that there are people in California participating in this. I got a nice report from a fellow Orgonite gifter in Northern California about the return of Delta breezes to the Stockton area. So that is wonderful to hear that they're getting their summer breezes back, getting some cooler air. We have the monsoon season stretching westward and expanding, and we have more sunny days for the Pacific Northwest, cleaner air, and I heard that in Astoria, where we passed through at the end, that the weather is not usually this way, that it was much nicer than usual. So Astoria, I remember too from when I lived up there, it never was so clear and beautiful. It was always murky, even in the summer. I went there in August of 2005 and it was murky. So it was really nice to see those clear skies with puffy transmutation clouds, and to pass through Portland again on the way out and see, yes, the energy is still much improved, and drop another TV on a tower we missed. So it was very nice. And then we came back through Southern Oregon and back through the stumps of Medford and Ashland. And that really completed this gifting. It was a very, very big job in a very hostile region.
I just want to take this time to say one last thing here. If you're outside and feels like it's about 80, but your thermometer says 105, don't go blabbing around to people that it's 105.
Yeah, make sure your thermometer works, which it doesn't. None of them do. And that's another challenge we have, is learning what the temperature is.
Find out, you're going to have to estimate a little bit, but find out just how much that your thermometer is exaggerating the temperature, because it's always overestimating it, never the other way. Find out just how much it's overestimating the temperature, and then do the calculation from there. It could be anywhere from 5 to 25 degrees. I'm not joking when I say 25 degrees. We have caught the National Weather Service lying about temperatures as much as 25 degrees over what they actually are. So take it with a grain of salt.
And begin the search for a vintage thermometer. Not something from the 60s when they were promoting global cooling. I think it would read too cold. Something from the 70s or 80s. And let's find out what the temperatures really are. If you can even measure temperature, which I think you can't. But that's a story for another day.
And not a rectal thermometer either, because that's not going to help anyone.
Well, thank you very much for listening to our episode on Gifting the Pacific Northwest, Part 2. We hope that you're enjoying a beautiful summer and moderate temperatures, and hopefully you're getting a little bit of rain. Please check out our website, thekembo.com, and see what we've been up to. You can check our blog site. You can listen to some of our videos here, and check out the Vimeo. Thanks for all your support. Thank you for gifting Orgonite, and we'll see you again next time.